Back to Godhead Prabhupada Identity of Lord Chaitanya Back to Godhead Volume 03 p.16, 1960 Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is no other than the combined form of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. He is the life of those devotees who strictly follow the footprints of Sri Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatan Goswami both are principal followers of Sri Swarup Damodar Goswami, who acted as the most confidential servitor and constant companion of Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose name was known as Viswambhar in his early life. And from Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami comes as the direct disciple and the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami stands to be his direct follower. From Goswami Krishna Das Kaviraj, the direct disciple is Srila Nautam Das Thakur, who accepted Viswanath Chakrabarti as his servitor. Viswanath Chakrabarti accepted Jagannath Das Babaji, from whom Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was initiated, and Srila Gorkishore Das Babaji, the spiritual master of Om Vishnupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, the divine spiritual master of our humble self. The above is the chain of disciplic succession from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down to our humble self. As such, in this English commentation of the Chaitanya Charitamrita there will be nothing new manufactured by our tiny brain. It will contain only the remnants of foodstuff that was originally eaten by the Lord himself. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does not belong to the mundane plane of three qualitative modes. He belongs to the transcendental plane, spiritual sky, which is beyond the reach of imperfect sense perceptions of the living being domiciled in the material sky. No living being, including the highest erudite mundane scholar, because of his residence in the material sky, can approach the transcendental plane unless he submits himself to the transcendental sound transmitted from the far beyond spiritual sky and received through the oral sources in a receptive mood. In that mood only the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can be realized. As such, everything that will be described here has nothing to do with any sort of experimental thought created by the speculative habit of an unrest mind. It is not a mental concoction but spiritual experience in fact, which can be mentioned only by acceptance of the line of disciplic succession as described above, keeping the transmission of sound in perfect order. Any deviation from that line will bewilder the reader in understanding the mystery of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is a transcendental literature meant for postgraduate study of a student who has not only heard but also has realized all the essence of Vedic literatures such as Upanishad, Vedanta etc. and their natural commentations, Sri Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam respectively. This commentation of Chaitanya Charitamrita is presented for the study of sincere English scholars who are really seeking the absolute truth. It is not an arrogance of scholarship of a mental speculator, but it is a sincere effort to serve the order of a superior authority whose service is the life and soul of this tiny effort. There is not a bit of deviation from the revealed scriptures, and anyone who is in the line will be able to catch up the essence of this book simply by the method of submissive oral reception. The purport of the first part put up as an essay is as follows. There are in the beginning 14 Sanskrit shlokas as it will appear in the text portion describing the absolute truth. The next 3 shlokas in Sanskrit describe the 3 principal deities of Vrindavan, namely Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan, Sri Sri Radha Govinda Deva, and Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Ji. Out of the first 14 shlokas, the first one is the symbolic representation of the supreme truth. And the whole of the first part is as a matter of fact devoted to this single shloka. In that description, relevant facts in the matter of the spiritual master are all described. The spiritual master is bifurcated into 2 plenary facts called by the names of initiator spiritual master and instructor spiritual master. Both of them are one and identical because both of them are phenomenal manifestations of the supreme truth. Then there are devotees who are divided into 2 classes, namely, the apprentice and the past. The Supreme Lord exists with innumerable beams and expansions. Such expansions are called incarnations of the potency, incarnation of the quality and incarnation of authority. They are therefore 3 in all. The Lord is described in his manifestive and pastimous features. His potencies are described to be 3 principally. Such potencies are described as the consorts in the kingdom of God, the queens of Dwarkadama. The highest of all of them are the damsels of Braja. Lord Sri Krishna and his different plenary portions are all in the category of the Lord himself, while his devotees are considered as eternal associates. As such, the devotees are also his potencies. The potent and the potency being unavoidably one and the same thing, they are fundamentally one. But the function of the 2 being differently exhibited, they are simultaneously different also. Thus the absolute truth is manifested by diversity in one unit. This philosophical truth in pursuance of the Vedanta Sutra is called Achintya Veda Vid Tattva, or the conception of simultaneously one and different from the absolute truth. And in the later portion of this chapter the transcendental position of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and that of Sri Nityananda Prabhu is described with reference to the above theistic facts. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita has begun practically with a respectful obeisance unto the three deities of Vrindavan, namely Sri Radha Madan Mohan, Sri Radha Govinda and Sri Radha Gopinath Ji. These three deities of Vrindavan are the life and soul of the Bengali Vaishnavas who have a natural aptitude for domiciling in Vrindavan, and they are known as the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who are strictly in the line of Sri Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, do worship the divinity by chanting the mantra composed of 18 letters. Such chanting of transcendental sound belonging to spiritual sky is meant for developing a sense of transcendental relation with the Supreme Lord, reciprocation of mutual affectionate mellows, and takes on to achieve the desired success in loving service. The three deities mentioned above are the object of worship in three different stages of development, and the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu scrupulously follow these principles of approach. Gaudiya means the Bengali. The part of land in India between the southern side of Himalaya mountain and northern part of Vindhya hills is called Aryavarta, or the land of the Aryans. This portion is divided into 5 parts or provinces called by the name of Panchaguta. Such divisions are called Saraswat, Kashmir, Punjab, Kanyakubja, Uttar Pradesh encircling the city of Lucknow, Majiguta, MP, Mithila, Bihar and part of Bengal, and Utkal or Orissa. Bengal is called by some as Gauda Desha partly due to her forming portion of Mithila and partly because the capital of Hindu king Raja Lakshman Sen, who was known as Gauda. Later on, this portion of Bengal's old capital came to be known as Gaudapura and gradually as Mayapura. The devotees of Orissa are called the Auryas, and in the same way the devotees of Bengal are called Gaudiyas. That is the summary history of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and the devotees of the southern India are known as Dravidas devotee. As there are 5 provinces in the Aryavarta, so beyond there is Dakshinatya, which is also divided into 5 provinces called Panchadravirs. All 4 Vaishnava Acharyas as well as Sripad Shankaracharya of the Mayavad school, all of them appeared in the provinces of the Panchadravir. Amongst the Vaishnava Acharyas, all of whom are accepted by the Gaudiya Vaishnava, Sri Ramanujacharya appeared in the southern part of Andhra Pradesh at Mubutapuri. Sri Madhyacharya appeared at Pajakam in the district of Mangalese near Vimanjiri. Sri Vishnu Swami appeared at Pandya, and Sri Nimbarkar appeared at Mangurpatam in the extreme southern end. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for all practical purposes accepted the chain of disciplic succession of Madhyacharya. His line of Vaishnavas do not accept the Tattvavadis, who also claim as descendant of Madhyacharya. To keep a clear distinction from them, the Vaishnavas of Bengal call themselves as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Besides this, Sri Madhyacharya is known by another name called Sri Gaudiya Purnanda. And therefore Madhya Gaudiya Sampradaya is just the suitable name of the Gaudiya Vaishnava. Now coming again to the first 14 shlokas, the author wishes to offer his obeisances to his spiritual master, the Vaishnavas or devotees of the Lord, and to the Lord himself. By doing so the author desires success in his great attempt. By remembering these 3 foremost guardians of success, one can overcome all stumbling blocks in the path of devotional service. And as such one can achieve the desired object very easily. Such auspicious functions can be ascertained in 3 different ways. The first one is to ascertain the object of worship, the second one is obeisances, and the third one is benediction. Out of the first 14 shlokas, 2 only are meant for offering respectful obeisances to the object of worship particularly and ordinarily. In the third sloka the object of worship is ascertained, which gives us direction to the path of the absolute truth. In the 4 shlokas the author offers his holy benedictions to the people in general by wishing the divine grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the 4th sloka, the object of Sri Chaitanya's appearance is superficially described. But in the 5th and 6th shlokas the confidential reasons of Sri Chaitanya's appearance are distinctively described. Therefore out of the 14 shlokas, 6 are devoted for delineating the truth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whereas from the 7th to the 11th shlokas the truth about Sri Nityananda Prabhu is elaborately described. In the next 2 shlokas, i.e., by the shlokas numbers 12 and 13, the truth about Sri Advaita Prabhu is described. In the 14th sloka the summary is made as 5 tattvas or 5 principal factors of the absolute truth. The acts of auspiciousity are therefore chronicled in these 14 shlokas. And in the midst of such auspicious action, the object of worship is definitely ascertained. Now the author wishes to offer his respects to all the readers and audience of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita just in the manner of a humble Vaishnava before he makes a vivid analysis of each and every one of the above 14 shlokas. After offering his obeisances to all the audience he requests them to hear him attentively what he says about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with reference to the context of revealed scriptures. The first one of the above 14 shlokas is described as follows: Vanda Guru Nisa Bhaktani Shamastavatar Kantat Prakashamashatashahakshi Krishna Chaitanya Samgakam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, enjoys by his 6 different potencies and expansions as follows: 1. Krishna himself, 2. His incarnation, 3. His plenary manifestation, 4. His devotees who act as 2 kinds of spiritual masters, and 5. His different energies. The author offers his obeisance to all these 6 principles of the absolute truth. The 2 spiritual masters are, 1. The initiator, and 2. The instructor. He is first of all offered respectful obeisances. There is no difference between the initiator and the instructor's spiritual master. Although there is influence of functions of the 2 types of spiritual master, there is no difference in identity. The instructor's spiritual masters are the 6 Goswamins called by the name: 1. Sri Rupa, 2. Sri Sanatan, 3. Sri Bhadaraghunath, 4. Sri Ewa, 5. Sri Gopal Bhatta, and 6. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. The author accepts them as his instructor spiritual masters. By such acceptance it is specifically made clear that nobody should be accepted as a Gaudiya Vaishnava who has no obedience to these 6 Goswamins. He therefore offers his respectful obeisances unto them. He proceeds on further to pay his respects unto those unalloyed devotees, to which Sri Bhazdakar is the leading one. After this the author desires to pay his homage unto Advaita Prabhu, who is the plenary portion of the Lord. And then he proposes to make his obeisances unto Sri Nityananda Prabhu, counter manifestation of the Lord himself. Sri Gadadhar Prabhu is the eternal energy of the Lord himself, and the author offers his obeisances unto him with all respects. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the personality of Godhead himself, and this author offers his obeisance more than 1001 times at his lotus feet. The above is the process of approaching the Supreme Lord by gradual appreciation. That is the way of devotional service. If anyone desires unalloyed devotional service, one must keep his aim for associating with the devotees of Sri Krishna. By the association of the devotees only, a conditioned soul can achieve a taste for such transcendental love. By such association of devotees only one can revive his eternal relation with Godhead in his specific manifestation, as well as in the specific transcendental mellows which one has eternally imbibed in him. If any one of such neophyte devotees wants to know more about the supreme truth Sri Krishna, such fortunate devotee takes shelter of one or more than one spiritual masters and submissively inquires from them in the science of devotion. There are 2 ways of understanding the truths about Sri Krishna. A devotee who is already attracted by the name, form, quality etc. of the Supreme Lord may be directed to the specific manner of devotional service without wasting time in the matter of logical approach. The expert spiritual master knows well how to engage one's energy in the matter of transcendental loving service of the Lord, and thus according to the devotee's special tendency, he is engaged in the species of devotional service. The initiator spiritual master is one only because in the scriptures acceptance of more than one initiator spiritual master is always forbidden. But there is no limit for accepting a number of instructor spiritual master. Generally a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in the matter of spiritual science becomes the initiator spiritual master later on. We should always remember that a person who is reluctant to accept a spiritual master for initiation is sure to become baffled in his endeavor to go back to Godhead. Such person who is not properly initiated may present himself as a great devotee, but in fact he is sure to encounter many stumbling blocks on his way of progressive march towards spiritual realization, and the net result is that he has to continue the term of his material existence without any relief. Such helpless person is compared with a ship without a rudder, as such a careless ship cannot reach her destination. It is imperative therefore to accept a spiritual master if at all anyone desires to gain the favor of the Lord. Service of the spiritual master is essential in this matter. If there is no chance of directly serving the spiritual master, then the devotee does serve him by remembering his instructions only. There is no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore, his words of direction shall be the guide of the disciple. If a man thinks that he is above all suspicion and therefore there is no need of consulting any other else including the spiritual master, he becomes at once an offender in the lotus feet of the Lord, and an offender can never go back to Godhead. It is imperative also that a seriously inclined person must accept a bona fide spiritual master in terms of the Shastric injunction and give up the company of a pseudo-spiritual master in terms of social usages and hereditary or customary and ecclesiastic conventions. Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is one of the authorized spiritual masters, and as such he teaches us worship of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu along with his all constant associates. Such associates are principally 6, such as 1. Guru or the spiritual master, 2. Is a bhakta or the principle of servitorship, 3. Isa Prakasa or the principle of manifested Godhead. 4. Asavatara or the principle of incarnations of Godhead. 5. Isasakshi or the principle of potency of Godhead, and Isrupa or the principle of supreme lordship in person. These principles are adored at once by chanting the following transcendental sound, namely, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Basadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. In this arrangement, Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the personality of Godhead himself and Sri Nityananda is manifested Godhead available to everyone and all without any distinction. As such, he is the original spiritual master as well. All spiritual masters therefore must be as good as Sri Nityananda Prabhu without imitation. The followers of Nityananda Prabhu both in theory and practice are all descendants of the Lord. The family of Nityananda Prabhu is not fixed up in a particular type of flesh and blood or the bones ever. Sri Nityananda Prabhu does not belong to any ingredients of the mundane world. There is no difference between his body and self as ordinary living being. It is an offense therefore to bring in Nityananda Prabhu to the characteristics of mundane plane and falsely claim to become his flesh and blood. Anyone following the instructions of Sri Nityananda Prabhu and duly authorized by an acharya can perform the duty of bona fide spiritual master. Such spiritual master is intimately connected with Sri Nityananda Prabhu, but he can never claim to be identical with him, although he is no lesser than him in the matter of spiritual mastership. Sri Advaita Prabhu is the incarnation of the personality of Godhead. Sri Gadadhar Prabhu is his internal potency and Srinivas Prabhu is the chief of his innumerable devotees and servitors. The external potency of Godhead is called Maya, who can never stay as intimate associate of the Lord as much as darkness cannot remain in the presence of light, although darkness has no independent existence without light. Darkness is an illusion and temporary cover of the light. The relation of a disciple with his spiritual master is as good as his relation with the Supreme Lord. The spiritual master shall always represent himself as the humblest servitor of the personality of Godhead, but the disciple must look upon him as the manifested representation of Godhead. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita explains this fact very nicely in a number of pairs. Sonnet. He says that according to the tenets of authoritative scriptures, the spiritual master is equal in position like Sri Krishna because he bestows mercies upon his disciple. A spiritual master is not therefore an enjoyer of facilities offered by a disciple, but on the contrary he, the spiritual master, is a constant servitor as the parents are to their children. Without the most attentive service of the parents no children can grow up to a manhood, and similarly without the care of the spiritual master nobody can rise up to the plane of transcendental service. In the Srimad Bhagavad, SP November 17, 2022, Sri Krishna the personality of Godhead instructed Sri Uddhava as follows, My dear Uddhava, you can accept the spiritual master as myself. You should not, as a matter of fact, consider the spiritual master as an ordinary man and thus belittle his personality. Guru or the spiritual master represents all the dominating gods. As we have already discussed, the two principles of spiritual master, namely the initiator spiritual master and the instructor spiritual master, are one. So Srila Kaviraj Goswami says that the instructor spiritual master is as much a bona fide representative of Sri Krishna, because Sri Krishna himself also teaches us as instructor spiritual master from within and without. From within he teaches us as Paramatma, our constant companion, and from without he teaches us as it is in the Bhagavad Gita, and so also as the instructor spiritual master. The spiritual master is called Acharya or the transcendental professor. Such professors of spiritual science initiate the disciple in the studies of spiritual science, and the ceremony observed in this connection is called Upanayan, or to bring one nearer the spiritual master. One who cannot be so brought nearer to the spiritual master is indicated as Sudra, who remains without any sacred thread. The sacred thread hanging on the body of a Brahmin, Kshatriya and Vaishya is the symbol of such initiation by the spiritual master, and the thread is not worth even a pi if the same is put on as a matter of boasting a high parentage. It is the duty of the spiritual master to initiate the disciple by thread ceremony, and after such samaskara or purificatory process, the spiritual master begins to teach the disciple Vedas. A Sudra-born man is not debarred from such spiritual initiation, but he must be approved by a spiritual master who is authorized to award the right of becoming a Brahmin, if he at all finds the disciple to be perfectly in order. Such spiritual master can be bona fide only if he has himself a perfect knowledge of the Vedic Shastras and he himself is accustomed to abide by the injunctions of the Shastras. Specific description of this spiritual mastership as well as the sign of bona fide disciple are described both in the Manu Samhita, 2.140. as also in the Vayu Puranam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also, SP 11.29.6, Sri Uddhavaji, after hearing from Sri Krishna all necessary instruction about yoga, said, O my Lord, transcendental poets or experts in the spiritual science cannot express their indebtedness unto you even though they are endowed with a prolonged life of a Brahma. They are so unable because nobody can estimate the volume of your mercy which you manifest in the shape of a spiritual master from without and as the supersoul from within, all for dissipating the unfavorable conditions of a living being and for revealing yourself in his pure heart. In fact, the personality of Godhead out of his immense compassion only reveals himself as the spiritual master. Therefore in the dealings of an Acharya there is nothing except a servitorship attitude on behalf of the personality of Godhead. He is the supreme personality of servitor Godhead. Therefore if any person poses himself as an Acharya without such servitorship attitude, then he will be considered as offender and such offensive attitude cannot be a qualification of the Acharya. Cent percent servitorship attitude of an Acharya makes him a bona fide manifestation of the Supreme Lord and a real representative of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Dissatisfied by an attitude of sense gratification by mundane or one criticizes a real Acharya, dictated by envious temperament. But a bona fide Acharya is non-different from the personality of Godhead and therefore to maintain an envious attitude toward an Acharya is to envy the very personality of Godhead, producing a subversive effect in the matter of transcendental realization. As mentioned above, a disciple shall always behave with his spiritual master as manifestation of Sri Krishna. But at the same time it would be remembered always that a spiritual master cannot imitate or is authorized to imitate every one of the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna. False spiritual master poses himself as identical with Sri Krishna in every action and exploits the sentiments of an innocent disciple in various ways. The impersonalist only can mislead the disciple that the spiritual master is identical with Krishna in every respect, as such impersonalists desire ultimately to become one with him. The real philosophy is Achintya Vaidaiv Tattva, which establishes everything as simultaneously one and different from the personality of Godhead. That is the real position of a bona fide spiritual master. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami confirms this fact and says that we should always think of the spiritual master in terms of his intimate relation with Mukunda, Sri Krishna. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his Bhakti Sandarbha, 216, has clearly defined that a pure devotee's observation of the spiritual master and that of Lord Shiva as one with the personality of Godhead is estimated in terms of their becoming very much dear to him, the personality of Godhead, being identical in all respects. Following the footprints of Srila Das Goswami and that of Srila Jiva Goswami, later acharyas like Srila Viswanath Chakrabarti has also confirmed the same truth in his celebrated prayers on the spiritual master, that the spiritual master is accepted as identical with the personality of Godhead in all the revealed scriptures, but he is so accepted for his becoming very much dear and confidential servant of the Lord. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas therefore worship Srila Gurudeva, the spiritual master, in that light of being the servitor personality of Godhead, and in all old literatures of devotional service or in the songs of Srila Nattam Das Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur or any other unalloyed Vaishnavas, the spiritual master is always considered either as one of the confidential associate of Srimati Radharani or the manifested representation of Srila Nityananda Prabhu. A spiritual master who has to teach in the matter of transcendental science cannot be a mannerless and senseless deviated person. A mannerless person deviated from the truths of spiritual science cannot be designated as the bona fide Acharya. The Acharya spiritual master is divided into two as, 1. Liberated soul fully absorbed in meditation of devotional service, and 2. As the invoker of spiritual consciences of a man by means of relevant instruction. The science of devotion is divided in respect of, 1. The object of worship, and 2. The means of worship. The Acharya who is authorized to deliver Krishna in the true sense of the term enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him in the act of devotional service. To become initiated by the spiritual master means the beginning of submissive oral reception of transcendental instructions and thus to awaken him in the practical service of Vishnu. This procedure of devotional service is known as avadheya, or actions which one is duty-bound to do. The initiator spiritual master is the personal manifestation of Sri Srila Madan Mohan Vigraya, while the instructor spiritual master is the personal representation of Sri Srila Govinda Deva. Both these deities are worshipped in Vrindavan. Srila Gopinathji is the last attraction of spiritual realizations. In the Bhagavad Gita, BG 10.10, it is clearly stated as how Lord Srila Govinda Deva instructs his bona fide devotee. He says that persons who are constantly engaged in his transcendental loving service are awarded by him an attachment for him by enlightenment of theistic knowledge. And by this awakening of divine consciousness the devotee is enabled to relish the specific transcendental mellow in which he is eternally related. This awakening of divine consciousness is awarded to such persons only who were convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. They know that the supreme truth is the one without a second, all-spirit and powerful person full with senses transcendental, and from him everything is generated. He is the fountainhead of all eminence. Such pure devotees are always merged in the knowledge of Krishna and being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. The pure devotees exchange thoughts and realizations like big scientists exchange their views and result of researches in scientific academy. By each exchange of thoughts in regard to Krishna gives pleasure to the Lord, and as such with pleasure only Sri Krishna favors them with all enlightenment. The maxim in English God helps them so to help themselves is also appreciable in this transcendental realm. There are many such instances in the scripture about the personality of Godhead's action as the instructor spiritual master from within. He was the instructor spiritual master of Brahma, the original living being of the cosmic creation. When Brahma was first created within this universe, he was overwhelmed with it as to how he could apply his creative energy to decorate the whole cosmic situation. At first there was only sound, and it resounded with the word tapa, or to take trouble, for spiritual realization. One should voluntarily accept all sorts of troubles for spiritual realization, refraining from sense enjoyment. That is called tapa. The sense enjoyer can never realize God in his science. When Brahma, thus initiated by Sri Krishna, engaged himself in tapasya or in the acts of transcendental realization, he was by the pleasure of Vishnu able to visualize the transcendental world and spiritual sky known as Vaikuntha. Modern science can affirm this statement by its several discoveries like radio electrons, television, automation, transmission of radio messages, etc. But the science which was applied in the painstaking of Brahma, the original father of mankind, was still more subtler than modern science, and in time the material scientist may be able also how we can communicate with the Vaikuntha world, which is far beyond the material sky. When Brahma was able to enter into the Vaikuntha world, he inquired about the potencies of the Supreme Lord, and the inquiry was met by the personality of Godhead in 6 consecutive statements. They are as follows, and they are exactly the instructions from the personality of Godhead as the Supreme Spiritual Master. Bhagavad, February 19, 1930-35. 1. Transcendental knowledge about Sri Krishna is deeper than the impersonal knowledge of Brahman. Such knowledge is not only related with the fame and personality of Sri Krishna, but also it includes all other knowledge which are all related with Sri Krishna. There is nothing in existence which is not related with Sri Krishna. In a sense there is nothing except Sri Krishna, and yet nothing is Sri Krishna except his primeval personality of Godhead. All these knowledges make a complete transcendental science. And Vishnu wanted to give Brahma the full-fledged knowledge of all about them. The mystery of this transcendental knowledge eliminates impersonal attachment for the Supreme Lord, with the resulting effect of detachment for everything non-Krishna. And there are 9 different transcendental means for attaining this stage, which are substantiated by the submissive process of hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet, worshipping, praying, assisting, fraternizing, and sacrificing everything for him. These are different parts of the same devotional service which is full of transcendental mystery. The Lord said to Brahma that he was pleased upon Brahma, and by his grace only the mystery was being opened. 2. The mystery is about his personality and his transcendental personal form. The mystery is about the symptoms of his form, which is distinct from any form of mundane elements. The mystery about his immemorable forms is Shyam Sundar, Walrus, Rama, Gaur-Sundar, and his color of the form, namely whitish, yellowish, reddish, and cloudish. The mystery is about his qualities as responsive personality of Godhead to the pure devotees and impersonal Brahman to the dry speculators. His uncommon activities like lifting of the Govardhan hill, marrying as many as 16,000 of queens at Dvarka, or to enter into rasa dance with the damsels of Braja, expanding himself in as many forms as there were the damsels. And many other uncommon acts, of which only one aspect of scientific knowledge is presented in the body of the Bhagavad Gita, so widely read and adored all over the world by all classes of scholars, with as many interpretations as there are the number of empiric philosophers. Thus he disclosed himself in all the above mysterious aspects. The truth was revealed to Brahma by the process of descending knowledge without any help of the ascending process. His mercy descends from him to a devotee like Brahma, or from Brahma to Narada, and from Narada to Vyasa, and Vyasa to Sukdeva, etc. in the bona fide chain of disciplic succession. We cannot discover the mystery by any of our mundane endeavor, but it is opened only by his grace to the proper devotee. And there are different stages of such devotees. The mystery is gradually opened in the proportion of gradual process of development of service attitude. In other words, the impersonalists who simply depend on the strength of their poor fund of knowledge by a speculative habit without any submissive service of hearing, etc. as mentioned above, cannot penetrate into that mysterious region of transcendence where the supreme truth is a transcendental person without a tinge of material elements. Discovering the mystery means eliminating of the impersonal feature realized by a common class of servitor. 3. In the course of disclosing the mystery of transcendental personality of Godhead, the word aham is deliberately used. This aham word is extensively used in the Bhagavad Gita also, which is the preliminary study of Srimad Bhagavad. Impersonal feature of the Absolute Person is called Brahman is clearly explained in the Bhagavad with emphasis on the word Aham. The Lord is never a created being of the cosmic manifestation. He exists prior to the creation of this material world. The impersonal Brahman or the inexplicable unknown are all subordinate to the transcendental person. And after the annihilation of this cosmic creation he shall exist eternally. In the Srutis or Vedas the same truth is explained in the following words, namely, there was Vasudeva only before creation and there was neither Brahma nor Shankara. Only Narayana was there and none else including Brahma and Rudra etc. His existence means his name, fame, form, qualities, paraphernalia, everything. The king is there means the king is there with all his associates and aristocracy. The king is never alone. When the name of the king is uttered, all his estates and para. This article ends here. Ed. Essays and Text. First part continued from issue 16. 4. This real and unreal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is more explicitly explained as follows. Darkness is the name of absence of light. In light there is no darkness, but it is the outside experience or negative conception of light. Similarly, the kingdom of God or the Vaikuntha world is the real reality without any change or annihilation. The material world is a temporary shadow of the Vaikuntha world and as such the life in the material world is temporary, knowledge imperfect and happiness flickering, as the shadow is always temporary and flicking and without any substance. The material world is the phenomenal representation of the noumenal Vaikuntha world. The sun rays is reflected by a mirror in darkness. The so-called light in darkness has no value if there was no sun. Reflection of the sun ray is a proof of the existence of sun. The living beings are so many separated fragments of the supreme whole. Such living entities in different categories of life enter into this material life and give it a false and temporary life. The matter is inert and therefore matter as it is has no automatic action. The sparks of the Supreme Lord or the living being handles matter in an enjoying spirit creates some interaction by different arrangement and the whole thing appears to be real. But actually the reality is not in the material world but it is in the spiritual world Vaikuntha. Both matter and the living entities are different energies of the same Supreme Lord although the living being is a superior energy than the material one. 5. The example of interaction of the material elements is understandable in the matter of real and unreal existence. The 5 elements like the sky, air, fire, water and earth do enter into the making of any material body but still all of them are aloof from such material construction. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or exchange of material elements in varied degrees. Although the sky is outside the body still it appears that it has entered all material constructions. In the same way the personality of Godhead is far beyond the reach of a conditioned living being but yet he has entered everything in the material construction including atoms electrons. The personality of Godhead in his all-pervading Paramatma or super-soul feature does enter in every entity call it the biggest or the minutest but he is realized only by entity who is submissive and surrendered soul. Proportionate development of submissiveness is the order of spiritual realization ultimately meeting the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man face to face. The surrendered soul proportionate to his development of an attachment transcendental for the Supreme Lord feels the presence of his beloved everywhere and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple of Sri Radha and Krishna seated on the decorated throne underneath the desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. His noses are engaged in smelling the fragrance of flowers offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. His ears are engaged in hearing the messages from the Vaikuntha world and his hands are busy in embracing the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. In such a way the Lord is manifested before the pure devotee from within and without and these are some of the mysteries of devotional relation of a devotee and the Lord bound up by the tie of spontaneous love which is the goal of life for every living being. 6. Therefore those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science bothwise namely directly and indirectly. One has to learn bothwise namely the ways and means of approaching the desired destination as well as things which are hindrances to such progressive march. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple and the serious student has to learn the science from him in all respects. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness, conceived by the common man engaged in manual labor, is the lowest grade of happiness in relation with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by the fruitive worker either for this life or the life after death by pious activities to reach up to the plane of heaven the kingdom of the created gods with delegated powers. But this conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness of being one, in the impersonal Brahman. The happiness of Brahmananda, or the spiritual bliss derived from the impersonal Brahman, is also compared with a pit in the face of an ocean when one develops pure love for the Lord. Ever-increasing ocean of transcendental happiness is derived from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself for reaching that stage of life is the highest perfection of life. One should try to purchase a ticket for going back to home, back to Godhead, and the price for such traveling ticket is an intense desire only. This intense desire is not easy to awaken even by continuous pious activities of crores of life. All associations of mundane relations are sure to be broken in course of time, but once the relation is established with the personality of Godhead, in different mellows, it is never to be broken even after the annihilation of the material world. Srila Krishnada's Kaviraj Goswami therefore quotes an authoritative passage from the songs of Krishna Karnamrita composed by a great devotee, Srila Balwa Mangal Thakur. He was designated as Leelasuk. He intensely desired to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Lord and lived at Vrindavan for 700 years in the vicinity of Brahmakunda. Sri Balwa Mangal Thakur appeared in South India and was the chief disciple of Vishnu Swami. It is said that he installed Dwarkadish deity who was given over to the Ballava sect Vaishnavas for worship. He flourished in the 8th century Saka. Chintamani was his instructor, spiritual master, because at first it is she only who had shown him the spiritual path. Somagiri was his initiator, spiritual master, and Sri Krishna, who is constantly decorated with the plume feather of a peacock, was also his instructor, spiritual master. He has adored all of them on equal term, and that is the point we have to note down in this connection. In his adoration for Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, he describes that Srimati Radharani takes shelter under the shade of his lotus feet and enjoys the transcendental mellow of conjugal love. This complete treatise of Krishna Karnamrita is dedicated to the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. It is a book read and understood by the highest grade devotees of Sri Krishna. In our conditioned state, when we are engaged within the material body, it is not possible to see Sri Krishna with these naked eyes. But we can feel his presence if we offer to him bona fide service. And satisfied by such transcendental loving service only, the Lord, who is present in everyone's heart as the Super Soul, gives his advices and favors us by sending his representative, a liberated soul, as our instructor, spiritual master. Therefore it is imperative that in order to learn the transcendental science one must avoid the company of undesirable persons and shall always seek the company of the saints and sages who are able to impart us lessons on transcendental knowledge. The impregnated words of such realized soul penetrate within our heart and thereby eradicate all sorts of misgivings accumulated by years of our undesirable association. The undesirable persons, for a neophyte devotee, are 1. The gross materialists constantly engaged in the matter of sense gratification, and 2. Unbelievers who does not serve the personality of Godhead but serves the senses and whims of the mind by speculative habit. Intelligent persons seeking for transcendental realization shall avoid their company very scrupulously. The advantage of such association with saints and sages who are constantly engaged in discussion of messages from Vaikunta is described in the Bhagavad, March 25, 2022, which was spoken by Lord Kapila to his mother Devahuti. The Lord said, by intimate relation with the devotees, it so happens that the impregnated words of me are systematically discussed. And in their association only such messages become pleasing to the oral reception of the recipient. And in course of hearing these powerful words it is quite possible that the path of transcendental realization becomes clearer and resulting in first of all a reverence for me, gradually developing into attachment and ultimately transcendental love for me. The process of transcendental realization begins with a sense of reverence for the Lord. And by constant company with the saints and sages such reverence transforms into devotional service which drives away all sorts of unholy attachment for material objects. When he is thus cleaned of all misgivings, a systematic steadiness follows, giving birth to attachment, leading ultimately to spontaneous love for Godhead. And who is a saint? Only those who have unalloyed devotion for the Lord are pure saints. Due to such pure devotional love for the Lord, such saints develop the sense of awakening of the Lord's presence. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is said like this. The Lord said to Durbasha Muni, who picked up a quarrel with a great householder devotee, namely King Ambarish. As a result of misunderstanding between the king and the Muni, the latter tried to kill the king when Sudarshan Chakra, the celebrated weapon of Godhead, appeared on the scene for protection of the devotee king. When Sudarshan Chakra attacked Durbasha Muni, he fled away frightened by the weapon and sought shelter practically from all big gods of the heaven. Everyone was unable to protect him, so ultimately he approached the personality of Godhead, who also sent the Muni to beg pardon from the king and glorified his devotees by saying, "The saints are my heart and I am also their hearts. They do not know anything besides myself, and reciprocally I also do not know anyone else besides them." In the same way Maharaj Judhisthira addressed Saint Vijaya after his return from a tour of pilgrimage. The king said, "My dear sir, Saints like you are themselves pilgrimage personified. Such saints, on account of their hearts being occupied by the personality of Godhead, can cleanse the place of pilgrimage polluted by the sinners who visit such places to purify themselves. Such devotees are of two different varieties, namely, 1. The associates, and 2. The neophytes. Perfect servitors are called associates, whereas devotees who are endeavoring to attain perfection are called neophytes. Amongst the associates, some of them are attracted by the opulence of the personality of Godhead and others are attracted by conjugal love of Godhead. The former devotees are placed in the realm of Vaikuntha to render reverential service, while the latter devotees are placed in Vrindavan for direct service of Sri Krishna. The personality of Godhead also expands himself by three kinds of incarnations. They are, 1. Partial incarnation, 2. Qualitative incarnations are such as the three Purusha avatars expanded in the matter of creation of the material world, and other incarnations like Matsya, Kurma, Vara etc. About the qualitative incarnations, the trio of Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar, to create, maintain and annihilate the material world, are counted. And instances of empowered incarnations are like the king Prithu and the Vedavyas Muni. Apart from the incarnations of different categories of personality of Godhead, he manifests himself in two similar expansions called by the name Prakash and Vilash. Sri Krishna married at Dwarka 16,000 queens, and he was present with each and every one queen at the same time in the same form also. Similarly, during Rasa dance he expanded himself in the same form to perform the duet with each and every damsel of Braja. Such innumerable forms of Godhead of the same original pattern is called Prakash Vigraya. When he expands himself a little differently from his original form, such as the form of Valadeva in Vrindavan and Narayana in Vaikuntha, then he expands his Vilash Vigrayas. There is no difference in bodily forms of both Sri Krishna and Valadeva, but the color is different. Similarly, in Vaikuntha, Narayana has 4 hands while Sri Krishna has 2 hands only. So these forms of Valadeva and Narayana are called Vilash Vigrayas. The forms of Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradumna, Samkarshana etc. are also his Vilas expansions. This fact is corroborated by the words of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10.33.35, the all-powerful personality of Godhead Sri Krishna engaged himself in the performance of Rasa dance by placing himself separately in between a group of 2 gopas. All the gopas present in the dance felt it individually that they were being embraced by the Lord as soon as the latter entered the dance. And to have a glimpse of this transcendental Rasa dance, all the denizens of heaven appeared in planes accompanied by the respective consort. They then showered flowers from the sky in reverential delight. The showers of flowers from them were combined with celestial concert music. And the same Bhagavatam, 10.69.3, description of the Lord's Rasa dance is given as follows: It was astonishing that Lord Sri Krishna, who is one without a second, expanded himself in 16,000 similar forms to present himself during his marriage with 16,000 queens in their respective homes. And in the Laghu Bhagavatamritam compiled by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the fact is corroborated as follows: LBA 1/9. Such innumerable forms exactly resembling each other in all respects are called Prakash Vigraya. And so far the Vilash Vigraya is concerned as explained above, the same Laghu Bhagavatamrita confirms as follows: by the inconceivable mystic powers of the Lord, when he presents himself in different forms with equal potency, the Lord is then known as Vilash Vigraya. Such Vilash Vigrayas are represented in Valadeva in Vrindavan and Narayana in Vaikuntha, as well as his expansion in the forms of Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradumna, and Samkarshan. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita thus explains the feature of different potencies of Sri Krishna. There are then primary different consorts of the Lord. They are called the Lakshmas queens and the damsels of Braja. Consorts in Vaikuntha are called Lakshmis as Lakshmi Narayana. Consorts in Dwarka are called queens as Rukmini Krishna, and the consorts in Vrindavan are called Gopas as Radha Gopinath. Gopinath Sri Krishna, who takes pleasure in being addressed as the son of the king of Braja, Nanda Maharaj, is the original form of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna and his different incarnations' potential power in all such innumerable expansions are associated with further smaller expansions or servitor expansions called by the name devotees. The personality of Godhead remains overcrowded by his pure devotees and consorts. Therefore, to offer prayers to the Lord must be preceded with prayers for his associates, and this procedure is good in all respect for the praying devotee. The author has therefore offered his respects in the above manner, and next he proceeds to deal with the second sloka out of the 14th prayerful offerings. The second sloka is referred to above is described as follows: I offer my respectful prayers to both the Lords, namely Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Nityananda combinedly, who have appeared as the sun and the moon on the Tiger Hill horizon of Gudadesha, Bengal, surprisingly at one and the same time. And who are these Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Nityananda? They are no other than the same Sri Krishna and Balarama, who are the resources of all rays of the sun and the moon. Both of them in persons appeared themselves simultaneously on the horizon of GODHEAD. Appearance of the Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Nityananda causes disappearance of all sorts of darkness, and the whole universe is enlightened thereof. By such enlightenment the substance is revealed, like the sun and the moon reveal the perspective view of the world. By such dissipation of darkness by the Lords, religion in the real sense is explored by a common man. The appearance of these two transcendental brothers makes it easier to understand the absolute truth, along with the disappearance of nesciences. Darkness which covers real knowledge is known as pretentious activities. Such pretensions of advancement in knowledge are called by the name of 1. Religiosity, 2. Economic development, 3. Sense gratification, and at last but not the least, 4. The desire for liberation by merging with Brahman. This fact is corroborated by the second beginning sloka of Srimad Bhagavad as follows: Bhag 1.1.2. The cult of Bhagavad Dharma is real religion for the complete set of living being and specially for the humankind, whereas other cults within the categories of the above four items are pretension culture leading to unrest, war, pestilence, animosity, violence and enviness, conditions of corruption, bickerings, and all morbid state of social existence. Add here religion real and religion pretentious. BTG no. Out of the above-mentioned four kinds of pretentious activities, the last one, or the desire to get oneself merged into personal Brahman, is the subtlest type of atheism. As soon as such subtlest type of atheism, embushed in the dress of liberation, is encouraged, the push of devotional service for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is completely blockaded by them. Not only these pretentious activities but also other altruistic or subversive activities for sense gratification. All are derogatory to the progressive path of devotional service. But by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and that of Nityananda Prabhu, such misleading paths of darkness is dissipated and the real substance becomes revealed in true perspective. And what is that substantial reality? It is Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his devotional service, and to attain to the stage of love for Sri Krishna. The easiest way to gain all these at a time is the chanting of his transcendental name. The sun or the moon vanishes external darkness and exposes all material objects to the vision of the living being. But these two brothers penetrate into the innermost corner of one's heart and eradicate nescience. After doing so they lead a living being to meet two Bhagavats, of whom one is called the Bhagavad Puranam and the other is called Devati Bhagavad. Bhagavad means in relation with the personality of Godhead. These two types of Bhagavats are competent to impregnate the transcendental mellow of spiritual attachment, and by such attainment of transcendental attachment, the Supreme Lord becomes himself our constant companion. The most astonishing feature of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu is that both of them have appeared simultaneously, and they can very easily penetrate into the heart of the fallen soul. There are, therefore, veritably useful more than the mundane sun and moon, and it is a fortune for the people of the world to be favored by them. Let us therefore pray at the lotus feet of these two brothers, and this act of submission will scare away all kinds of opposition and will help in attaining the goal of life. The author of Chaitanya Charitamrita thus finished the explanation of the first two stanzas, and now he will attempt to explain the third one. The subject matter is so grave and sublime that it requires lots of explanation, and has finished the job in as much as possible minimum words. One should speak shortly, but it must carry on a volume of meaning. That is the beauty of impressive expostulation. And anyone who will hear or read these explanations with rapt attention will certainly be benefited in getting one's darkness of ignorance illumined. And by such attainment of knowledge one is sure to develop a deep attachment for Sri Krishna. The author has very carefully expostulated the truths in respect of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Advaita Prabhu, as well as the glories of their respective devotees. The truths have been so nicely explained that anyone hearing them will understand the essence of transcendental truth in nutshell. With all obedience and obeisance unto the lotus feet of the gods women, headed by Srila Rupa and followed by Sri Raghunath, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, namely Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, thus finishes the first chapter of the narration in the matter of prayers to the spiritual masters and their associates. To be continued.